"Scream louder, you idiot," my daughter-in-law whispered, thinking the static on the line would hide her voice. My son was hysterical, begging for $50,000 to save her from a ruptured heart, but the background acoustics told me they were standing in their kitchen, not dying in a trauma center. They thought I was just a senile widower with a fat bank account they could drain dry. They forgot I spent 40 years as a structural engineer, and I know exactly how to spot a fatal crack in the foundation before the whole house comes down. I didn't just deny the transfer. I prepared a controlled demolition of their entire lives. If you're listening to this, please subscribe to the channel and let me know where you're watching from in the comments. It helps to know I'm not rebuilding alone. The phone rang at 1:14 a.m., slicing through the stillness of the house like a diamond cutter through glass. It was not a normal ring. In the daylight, a phone is a utility. In the dead of night, it is an alarm. In the sprawling silence of my home, a 3-story Victorian I had restored with my own hands 30 years ago. The sound didn't just echo, it reverberated. It bounced off the crown molding I had sanded for weeks, rattled against the wainscoting I had leveled to the millimeter. It was sharp, violent, impossible to ignore. I am Robert. I am 68 years old. My hands, once steady enough to draft blueprints for suspension bridges, now carry the map of my life in their calluses and liver spots. I spent 40 years as a structural engineer. I have calculated the wind loads on skyscrapers in Chicago and the seismic tolerances for dams in the Pacific Northwest. I know that concrete cures slowly. I know that steel, for all its strength, becomes brittle in extreme cold. I understand the physics of failure. I know that every structure, no matter how much rebar you bury in its belly, has a breaking point, a limit where stress overcomes resistance. I just didn't know that tonight the structure being load-tested would be my own heart. I didn't wake up when the phone rang. I was already awake. Since my wife Martha passed away 2 years ago, sleep has become a fickle guest, visiting only in shallow, unsatisfying drifts. The other side of the bed remains perfectly made, a cold expanse of untouched linen that serves as a nightly reminder of the void. I was lying in the dark, staring at the ceiling where I knew a hairline crack was forming in the plaster, a settlement issue I kept meaning to address. I was listening to the house breathe. The cast-iron radiator in the corner clanked rhythmically, the sound of thermal expansion and contraction, metal singing the song of heat. Outside, the wind from the north was testing the gutters. I catalogued the sounds, the groan of the joist settling, the tap of an oak branch against the siding, then the scream of the digital ringer. I didn't jump. My body has learned to conserve energy. Instead, I felt a physical weight, like a cold, heavy stone drop from my throat into my stomach. It is a specific kind of dread reserved for parents of adult children. Calls at this hour are never about promotions or lottery wins. They are about entropy. They are about chaos, accidents, arrests, or death. I reached out a hand. My skin felt dry against the cool air. I fumbled for the receiver on the nightstand, my fingers brushing against the spine of the book I hadn't opened in a month. The caller ID glowed a sickly blue in the darkness. Daniel Sell. My son, my only boy. The one thing Martha and I had built that didn't come with blueprints. "Hello?" My voice was rough, unused for hours. It sounded like gravel mixing with wet cement. "Dad." "Oh God, Dad, pick up. Please, you have to help us." The voice on the other end was unrecognizable. It wasn't the voice of the 35-year-old man who sometimes called to borrow tools or complain about the housing market. It was shredded, high-pitched, hyperventilating. It was the frequency of sheer panic, the sound of a human being watching their world burn down around them. "I'm here, Daniel," I said. The engineer in me engaged automatically. "Stabilize the foundation." I sat up, swinging my legs over the side of the bed. The heart pine floorboards were freezing against my bare feet. A sharp shock that cleared the last fog of drowsiness. I switched on the bedside lamp. The sudden yellow light was blinding, casting long, distorted shadows across the room. "Slow down," I commanded, forcing my voice into a low, steady register. "Breathe. What is happening?" "It's Jessica," he screamed. The name tore out of his throat. But that wasn't the worst part. The background noise was wrong. Or rather, the lack of it. "She's... Oh God, there's so much blood. We're at the hospital, St. Jude's." I stood up. My hand gripped the phone so tight the plastic creaked. "She collapsed in the kitchen," Daniel sobbed, the words tumbling over each other in a cascade of terror. "We were just talking, and she grabbed her chest. The doctors, they say it's an aortic rupture, a tear in her heart. Dad, my chest tightened, a sympathetic resonance. Jessica was my daughter-in-law. She was 32. A woman with a sharp smile, expensive tastes, and a gaze that always seemed to be calculating the value of the furniture in the room. But she was young. She was healthy. She went to spin classes. She drank green juice. An aortic rupture? That was catastrophic failure. In engineering terms, that was the main cable snapping on a bridge. That was the widowmaker. That was a death sentence written in blood. "I'm coming," I said. I was already moving, reflexes honed by years of sight emergencies. Phone pressed to my ear. I reached for the pants I had draped over the chair the night before. "I can be there in 20 minutes. I'll take the highway. I'll drive fast." "No," Daniel shrieked. The volume spiked so high I had to pull the receiver away from my ear. The panic in his voice cracked into a wet, ugly sob. "There's no time. They won't operate, Dad. They won't touch her." I stopped moving. One leg in my trousers, one leg out. I froze. "What do you mean they won't operate?" I asked, the confusion warring with the adrenaline. "It's a level 1 trauma center. They have a duty of care. They have to." "The insurance," Daniel was choking on his tears, gasping for air like a drowning man. "I missed the payment. I didn't tell you. The policy lapsed last week. I thought I could make it up next paycheck." Lies. He was always bad with money, careless with details. But allowing health insurance to lapse? That was negligence. But now was not the time for a lecture on fiscal responsibility. "The hospital administration. They're blocking the surgical team," Daniel cried. "It's a specialist procedure. They need a deposit. They need proof of funds. A deposit. $50,000. Right now, or they let her die." I frowned in the darkness. The shadows in the corner of the room seemed to deepen. I have dealt with contracts my whole life. I have dealt with greedy developers who wanted to use cheaper steel. I have dealt with corrupt union reps and bureaucratic red tape that could strangle a project before the ground was broken. I know the world is cold. I know that money is the lubricant for the gears of society. But I also know the law. A hospital cannot refuse life-saving surgery on a dying patient because of a deposit. It is illegal. It is impossible. It violates the Hippocratic Oath and federal statutes. "Daniel," I said. My voice dropped to a low, steady rumble, the sound of a load-bearing wall settling. "Put the doctor on the phone." "I can't," he wailed. "Put the administrator on. Put a nurse on. Anyone. They're prepping the room." They kicked me out into the hallway. "Dad, please." She's looking at me through the glass. Her eyes are rolling back. She's dying. He took a breath, a ragged gasp of air that sounded like it hurt. "I sent you the routing number. Just wire it. If you don't, you're killing her. Do you hear me? You're killing her." I looked at my smartphone. A notification had popped up. A transfer request. $50,000. I had it. It was in the rainy day fund. Money I had saved from selling the lake house after Martha died. It was supposed to be for my care when I got too old to climb the stairs, or for the roof when the slate finally gave way. I could send it in seconds. Biometric login. One tap. For a heartbeat, a single terrifying oscillation. The father in me took over. I saw Daniel as a 5-year-old. He was scraping his knee on the driveway, looking at me with wide, trusting eyes, blood trickling down his shin. He didn't cry then. He just looked at me, believing with absolute certainty that I could fix it, that I could fix anything. I saw Jessica at their wedding, the way she laughed as they cut the cake. The light catching the diamond I had helped Daniel pay for. I saw the coffin of my wife, and the thought of losing another family member, of the house becoming even emptier, terrified me more than the loss of the money. My thumb hovered over the glowing green button on the screen. Confirm transfer. I almost pressed it. The emotional load was critical. The desire to save them was overwhelming. But then the engineer in me kicked in. The part of me that listens for stress fractures in the concrete. The part of me that measures the frequency of the wind against the steel. The part of me that knows that when the data doesn't match the observation, you do not proceed. I stopped. My thumb froze millimeters from the glass. Something was wrong. The frequency was off. The structural integrity of the story had a hairline crack. "Daniel," I asked. "Hurry. The nurse is coming out. She says we have 2 minutes before the brain damage starts." I closed my eyes. I pressed the phone harder against my ear, creating a seal. I pushed past Daniel's screaming, past the static, past my own racing heart. I needed to inspect the site. I needed to hear the environment. I listened to the background. I closed my eyes. I pressed the phone harder against my ear, the plastic digging into my cartilage until it hurt. I needed pain. It sharpened the senses. I pushed past Daniel's screaming. I pushed past the blood rushing in my own ears. I became a receiver. I became an instrument of measurement. If my son was standing in a trauma hallway of a level 1 trauma center, the acoustic signature is unmistakable. I have designed HVAC systems for hospitals. I know the soundscape of emergency medicine. It is a cacophony of controlled chaos. I should hear the distinct high-frequency whine of the pneumatic tube systems in the walls. I should hear the PA system, the disembodied voice echoing off hard surfaces. Code blue, room 4, respiratory to triage. I should hear the rhythmic, synthetic beeping of EKG monitors, a sound that cuts through everything. I should hear the squeak of rubber soles on polished linoleum, the specific friction of urgency. I should hear the roar of the air scrubbers, the industrial ventilation required to cycle the air 6 times an hour. I waited. I filtered. Dad, hurry, Daniel shrieked, his voice cracking at the top of his range. The nurse is looking at her watch. She says time of death is coming. I held my breath. I heard none of that. Instead, beneath the layer of Daniel's frantic voice, I heard a low, steady hum. It was a compressor, not an industrial HVAC unit, but the cyclical, rattling thrum of a residential refrigerator, specifically a compressor that was slightly unbalanced. A sound I had noted in Daniel's kitchen last Thanksgiving and told him to get serviced. And then I heard something else. It was faint, rhythmic, and devastating. Tick, tock, tick, tock. A clock. An analog clock with a mechanical movement. Hospitals use digital clocks. They are silent. They display red numbers on the wall. They do not tick. But the antique grandfather clock in Daniel's hallway, the one I had given them as a housewarming gift, ticked with a heavy wooden resonance. My thumb moved away from the transfer button. The blood in my veins turned to ice water. The engineer in me had found the structural flaw. The father in me was screaming in denial. But the data was irrefutable. And then in the brief second when Daniel stopped screaming to inhale, a gap in the noise, no longer than a heartbeat, I heard it. It was a whisper. It was not frantic. It was not the gurgle of a dying woman. It was not the prayer of a victim. It was sharp, hushed, controlled. The voice of a stage manager giving a cue from the wings. Tell him the machine is flatlining. Scream louder, you idiot. It was a woman's voice. It was Jessica. She didn't sound like a woman whose aorta was unzipping inside her chest. She didn't sound like a woman whose blood was filling her pericardium. She sounded annoyed. She sounded impatient. She sounded like a director on a movie set who was frustrated with a bad act. The air left my lungs in a rush, as if I had been punched in the solar plexus. The room felt suddenly freezing, the temperature dropping 50 degrees in a second. It was as if the windows had blown open in a winter storm, letting the snow bury me. But the windows were closed. The cold was coming from the phone. They weren't at St. Jude's. They were at their house. They were standing in their kitchen, surrounded by granite countertops and stainless steel appliances. They were probably looking at a laptop screen, refreshing the banking page, waiting for the notification. My son was not a widower in waiting. He was a thief, and his wife was the mastermind. My heart didn't break. Heartbreak is a hot, messy emotion. This was different. My heart calcified. It turned into something hard, gray, and stone-like. The load-bearing walls of my love for them buckled, and then, in a cloud of dust, collapsed. "Dad?" Daniel screamed back into the phone, his performance hitting a crescendo. "Did you send it? The monitor is going straight?" "Dad, say something." "She's gone." I took a breath, a long, slow inhale through my nose. I looked at the glowing screen of my phone. $50,000. It was just numbers. Pixels. But to them it was everything. To me, it was the price of the truth. I let the silence hang. 1 second. 2 seconds. 3 seconds. I wanted him to feel the weight of it. I wanted him to hear the silence of the house he claimed to be away from. No, I said. The word was quiet. I didn't shout. I didn't rage. I spoke it with the finality of a judge delivering a verdict. It landed like a sledgehammer on a glass table. The screaming on the other end stopped instantly. It was as if someone had cut a wire. "What?" Daniel whispered. The panic vanished. The hyperventilation ceased. It was replaced by a cold, stunned shock. The mask had slipped. "No," I repeated. "I am not sending the money. You're gonna let her die?" He tried to ramp the panic back up, but the momentum was gone. It sounded hollow now. "Dad, you can't be serious." I heard her, Daniel," I said. "What?" "I heard her give you the order." There was a pause, so heavy it felt like a physical weight pressing down on the telephone line, sagging the wires between my house and theirs. I could hear Daniel's breathing hitch. I could almost see the color draining from his face. I could almost see Jessica's face twisting in rage, her hands snatching at the phone. "I heard the clock," I continued, my voice devoid of emotion. "I heard the refrigerator, and I heard her call you an idiot." Silence. Absolute, damning silence. Then the line clicked. He hung up. No defense, no denial, just the cowardice of a disconnection. I stared at the phone in the dark. The screen went black. I didn't scream. I didn't throw the device against the wall, though every muscle in my arm twitched with the urge to destroy it. I placed it gently back on the nightstand, aligning it perfectly parallel with the edge of the wood. I lay back down. I pulled the quilt up to my chin. It was a quilt Martha had sewn. It smelled faintly of lavender and old fabric. My heart was hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Thump, 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 like a bird trapped in a box. Like a structural bolt, vibrating loose under immense tension. I stared at the ceiling. The crack in the plaster seemed to widen, and the shadows. I thought of Daniel. I thought of the weekends we spent building the treehouse. I thought of the way he used to look at me when he couldn't solve a math problem. "How?" I asked the darkness. "How did we get here?" I felt a tear slide from the corner of my eye. It ran hot across my temple and into my ear. It was the only leak in the system. I didn't sleep. The demolition had begun. The explosives had been detonated at the base of the pillars. Now, I just had to watch the building fall. The sun rose gray and bleak. It filtered through the blinds like dirty water, casting stripes of dull light across the floor. The world looked washed out, desaturated. I got up at 6,000 a.m. Routine is the only defense against chaos. When the structure is failing, you follow the protocol. You inspect. You assess. You act. I walked to the bathroom. My footsteps were heavy. The house felt different this morning. Yesterday it was a home filled with memories. Today it felt like a crime scene. It felt violated. The silence wasn't peaceful anymore, it was expectant. I showered. The water was hot, scalding. I stood under the spray for 10 minutes, trying to wash the sound of my son's fake tears out of my skin. I shaved. I looked at myself in the mirror. The man staring back looked older than he had yesterday. The lines around his mouth were deeper. His eyes were harder. The warmth, the soft grandfatherly light that used to reside there, was gone. It had been extinguished. I put on a crisp white shirt. I buttoned it to the top. I put on my work boots. I tied the laces tight. I went to the kitchen. The granite island was cold to the touch. I made coffee. Black, strong. The grinder roared, a violent noise that filled the empty kitchen. I sat at the island. The morning paper lay untouched in front of me. I wasn't reading. I was waiting. I knew the phone would ring again. I knew they wouldn't give up. You don't stage a fake death for $50,000 and then just walk away when the bank vault stays closed. That kind of desperation has momentum. They would panic. They would scramble. And then they would attack. Desperate people don't just walk away. They come back with dynamite. I took a sip of the bitter coffee. I watched the dust motes dancing in the gray light. Come on, I thought. Finish it. At 7:45 a.m. the landline rang. It sat on the far end of the counter. a heavy, corded relic I kept out of habit. Its ring was mechanical, a trill of metal bells striking each other. In a house full of silence, it sounded like a fire alarm. I let it ring twice. 1, 2, I took a sip of my coffee. I wasn't rushing anymore. Emergency requires speed. Tragedy requires patience. I picked up the receiver. "This is Robert," I said. My voice was steady, the voice of a man reading the spec sheet. "Mr. Robert Miller?" The voice on the other end was deep, authoritative, but lined with a weary gravel. I recognized the timbre immediately. It was the voice of a man who spent his days cataloging the failures of human nature. "This is Captain Frank Reynolds from the 4th Precinct." My hand tightened on the receiver until my knuckles turned white. The plastic felt like it might crack. I knew Frank. We were in the Rotary Club together years ago. We had volunteered at the soup kitchen on holidays. He was a good man, a man who believed in order, but his job had worn him down like water wearing down limestone. "Yes, Captain," I said. I didn't call him Frank. This wasn't a social call. "Sir, I'm calling regarding your son, Daniel Miller." The air in the kitchen seemed to vanish. Is he okay?" The question escaped before I could stop it. The father in me flared up, a reflex I couldn't kill. A structural flaw in my own design. Even knowing he was a thief, even knowing he was a liar, the biological imperative to protect my offspring surged through my nervous system. "Physically, he is fine, sir," Reynolds said. The pause that followed was heavy. "But he is currently in our custody, along with his wife, Jessica." The words hung in the air, suspending the dust motes. Custody, not the hospital, not the morgue, not the trauma unit, jail. "What happened?" I asked, though a part of me already knew. The trajectory of desperation is predictable. It always points down. "We received a call at 3:30 a.m., Reynolds said, the sound of shuffling papers audible in the background. "A disturbance at a 24-hour check cashing facility on 5th Street, the quick cash on the corner of Elm." "Check cashing?" I asked. The 5th Street district was a blight. Neon signs, pawn shops, payday lenders. It was a place where hope went to be pawned, for pennies, on the dollar. "Your son and his wife were attempting to cash a check from your business account, Miller Engineering, for $50,000. I closed my eyes. The shame was a physical heat rising up my neck. "They tried to forge my signature. It was a bad forgery, sir. Amateur." The signature didn't match the file, and the amount triggered a secondary verification. The clerk got suspicious. He stalled them and hit the silent alarm. Reynolds paused. I could hear him lighting a cigarette, the click of the lighter and the sharp intake of breath. When my officers arrived, well, it was a scene, Robert. "Tell me," I said. "Your son was frantic," Reynolds continued. "He was screaming that his wife was dying, that he needed the cash for surgery. He was fighting the officers, trying to climb over the glass partition to get to the clerk. And Jessica? She was waiting in the car." Reynolds' voice grew colder. "When we approached the vehicle, she was calm. She was eating a bagel, Robert. Cream cheese. While her husband was inside screaming that she was bleeding out, she was finishing her breakfast. Eating. The image seared itself into my mind. Daniel, the puppet, dancing on his strings in a fluorescent-lit cage, hysterical with fear. Jessica, the puppeteer, sitting in the dark, feeding herself, waiting for the money. "I see," I said. The words tasted like ash. "Mr. Miller, your son is in a bad way. He's hysterical. He's asking for you. He claims you authorized the check over the phone. He says you told him to sign it because you were out of town." Reynolds sighed. "He says you gave him permission. He's sticking to the story, even though we found the blank checkbook in his glove box." I opened my eyes. The kitchen looked the same as it always did. The copper pots hanging from the rack, polished to a shine, the clean counters, the high ceilings. But it felt different. It felt fragile, as if the beams holding it up were rotting from the inside out. "He is lying," I said. My voice was flat. "I did not authorize it." "We figured as much," Reynolds said. "But given the family connection, and your standing in the city, we wanted to call you before we fully processed the felony fraud charges. It's It's delicate. If you come down here, we can clear this up. You can make a formal statement. I'll be there in 30 minutes. I hung up. I finished my coffee. I didn't rush. I rinsed the cup and placed it in the dishwasher. I walked to the hallway mirror. I adjusted my collar. I smoothed my gray hair. I looked at the man in the reflection. He looked like a statue that had been left out in the rain for too long. Hardened. I grabbed my keys. I didn't take the truck. I took the sedan. It was quieter. I drove to the station in silence. No radio. No news. Just the sound of the tires on the asphalt and the hum of the engine. The city passed by, outside the window. I looked at the buildings I had helped design. The skyline was a testament to order, to geometry, to physics. People think engineering is about strength. It isn't. It's about balance. It's about distributing the load so that no single point fails. My family had failed. The load had been concentrated on a weak point, and it had snapped. The 4th Precinct station smelled of stale coffee, floor wax, and misery. It was a smell that permeated the drywall, a scent of bad decisions and lost causes. I walked past the front desk. My boots clicked on the linoleum, a sharp, authoritative rhythm. Captain Reynolds met me at the security gate. He was a big man, his uniform straining at the shoulders. His gray mustache drooped over his mouth, and his eyes were rimmed with red. "Robert," he said. He extended a hand. I took it. His grip was firm, but his skin was dry. "I'm sorry it came to this, Frank. Me too. It's a mess." He swiped his card and the heavy steel gate buzzed. "Come on back." We walked down a long corridor painted a depressing shade of institutional beige. "Where are they?" I asked. "I have them in separate interview rooms. Standard procedure. Jessica is lawyered up. She demanded a public defender immediately. She hasn't said a word since she finished her bagel. And Daniel is a mess. He waived his right to counsel. He just keeps crying for you. He thinks you're coming to save him. Let me see him." Reynolds hesitated. "He's recording, Robert. Everything you say." "I know the law. Frank, open the door." Reynolds stopped in front of a heavy metal door marked Interview B. He swiped his card. The lock clacked open. I stepped inside. The room was small, cold, and windowless. The air was recycled and smelled of sweat. Daniel was sitting at the steel table. His hands were cuffed to a ring bolt in the center. He was wearing the same clothes he had worn yesterday, a wrinkled polo shirt and designer jeans that were now stained with dirt and grease. When the door opened, he looked up. His face was a ruin. His eyes were swollen shut. His nose was running. His skin was pale and clammy, the color of uncooked dough. He looked 10 years older and 5 years younger all at once. An aged child. "Dad!" He scrambled up, the chain rattling violently against the table. "Dad, thank God! Tell them you told me to write the check. Tell them it's a misunderstanding." I stood by the door. I didn't step forward. I folded my arms across my chest, creating a barrier. "Sit down, Daniel." He froze. He saw my face. He didn't see the father who used to sneak him extra dessert. He saw the engineer who condemned unsafe structures. He collapsed back into the metal chair. "Dad, please," he whimpered. "Jessica, she's sick. Maybe not the heart. Okay, not the heart. But she's sick in the head. She's desperate." "She made you do it?" I asked. "Yes, she made me. She drove us there. She said we had no choice." "There is always a choice," I said. "You chose to forge my name. You chose to scream into the phone while she checked her watch." "We owe money, Dad. Bad money." Daniel leaned forward, the desperation manic in his eyes. "To whom?" "To a guy, a private lender. Vinny. I owe him 60 grand. He said he'd kill us, Dad. He said he'd break my legs. He said he'd come to your house next." I watched him. I analyzed the stress patterns in his face. "Vinny," I repeated. "Yes, he's an animal. Jessica, she panicked. She came up with the hospital story because she knew you wouldn't pay for gambling debts again. She was trying to protect you from the truth. New lies on top of old ones. Layers of sediment. I looked at my son, the boy I had taught to fish in the pristine waters of the lake, the boy I had sent to a private university. You lied to me last night, I said. I was scared. You weren't scared, I said coldly. You were acting. I heard the pitch of your voice, Daniel. It was a performance. Dad, I heard the whisper, I said, leaning in slightly. I heard her directing you. Scream louder, you idiot. Daniel went pale. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. The Vinny story faltered in the face of the reality of his submission to his wife. And the check, I asked. Did she hold your hand while you traced my signature? Did she force the pen into your fingers? Daniel looked down at his hands that had never done a hard day's labor in their life. I didn't have a choice, he whispered. You had a phone, I said. You could have called me and told me the truth. You could have asked for help with the debt. Instead, you tried to steal from the only person in the world who would have helped you. I turned to the door. Dad, where are you going? Panic spiked in his voice again. Real panic this time. I'm leaving, Daniel. You can't leave me here. They're talking about felonies. Grand larceny. Forgery. Dad, I can't go to jail. I won't survive in there. I know, I said. I built this city, Daniel. I know the laws. I know the penalties. Bail me out. Please. I'll do anything. I'll go to rehab. I'll work for you. I'll sweep the floors at the firm. I'll do it for free. I looked back at him one last time. The fluorescent light hummed above us. The distance between us was only 10 feet. But it felt like a canyon. I don't need free labor, I said. I have plenty of workers. I looked at his handcuffs. I looked at the weakness in his jaw. I need a son, and right now, I don't see one in this room. I knocked on the metal door. Reynolds opened it immediately. We're done here, I said. Dad! No! Dad! Daniel's screams followed me down the hallway. They echoed off the tile, bouncing around the station. I didn't look back. I walked straight ahead. I had to assess the damage to the rest of the structure. I had to find out just how deep the rot went. I didn't go home. The house was too quiet, too full of the ghosts of the morning. I drove downtown, navigating the grid of the city with autopilot precision. I parked in the underground garage of the Miller Building, a 12-story glass and steel structure I had designed 10 years ago. It was my masterpiece, a building that used an external exoskeleton of trusses to keep the interior floor plates completely open, free of columns. I took the private elevator to the top floor. The doors slid open with a smooth, expensive hiss. Miller & Associates was a sanctuary of order. The carpet was plush charcoal. The walls were lined with framed awards and black and white photos of suspension bridges. I walked past the reception desk. My secretary, Linda, was on the phone. She had been with me for 20 years. She knew my coffee order, my anniversary, and my blood type. She looked up, her smile faltering when she saw my face. Mr. Miller, you have a site visit at 10. The structural integrity review for the stadium. Cancel it, I said. I didn't stop walking. Cancel everything, Linda. Clear the day. She stood up, the phone halfway to her ear. Is everything all right, Robert? No. I stopped at the door to my office. Get me the forensic accounting files for the last 5 years. Personal and business. And call Sarah. Sarah was my niece, my sister's daughter. She was a prosecutor for the district attorney's office, specializing in white-collar crime. She was sharp, ethical, and tough as nails. Everything Daniel was not. Tell her to come now, I said. Tell her it's a family emergency. Sarah arrived 45 minutes later. She found me sitting at the long mahogany conference table, my jacket off, my sleeves rolled up. I was surrounded by stacks of bank statements, ledgers, and credit card reports. The air in the room was thick with the smell of toner and stale anxiety. Uncle Robert, she said, closing the heavy glass door behind her. She was wearing her court suit, her hair pulled back in a severe bun. Reynolds called me. I heard about the arrest. She sat down opposite me. She didn't offer platitudes. She knew me better than that. It's worse than I thought, Sarah, I said. I spun a document across the polished table. It slid smoothly and stopped in front of her. Look at this. I had spent the last hour digging, I had approached the paperwork like a structural collapse investigation. I looked for the crack. I looked for the missing materials. I found things I had missed before because I was too busy being a father, too busy trusting the people who shared my last name. Sarah picked up the sheet. She adjusted her glasses. A second mortgage on Daniel's house, she asked, her brow furrowing. Dated 3 years ago. Co-signed by you. I never signed that, I said. My voice was low, vibrating with suppressed rage. The signature looks like yours, she noted, tilting the page. It's a tracing, I said. Look at the pressure points. It's too heavy on the upstrokes. They forged my signature 3 years ago. They took out $200,000 against the equity I gave them for the down payment. $200,000? Sarah's eyes went wide. Where did the money go? Daniel's house hasn't been renovated. He drives a leased car. Shell companies, I said. I slid another stack of papers across the table. Look at these transfers. Monthly withdrawals. JM Consulting. Vance Logistics. Blue Heron LLC. Vance. Sarah looked up, her eyes sharp. Isn't that Jessica's maiden name? Exactly. It was sloppy. Arrogant. The money goes in, I said, pointing to the ledger, and it disappears. Offshore accounts. Cayman, Panama. I traced the routing numbers. Sarah flipped through the documents, her prosecutor's mind assembling the timeline. This isn't gambling, Robert. Gamblers are chaotic. They withdraw cash at ATMs and casinos. They make desperate transfers at 2:00 a.m. She looked up at me. These are structured withdrawals, regular intervals. Just under the $10,000 reporting limit. This is embezzlement. They're squirreling it away. Jessica, I said. The name tasted like poison. She's the brains, Sarah agreed. Daniel doesn't have the patience for this. He can't even balance a checkbook. She's been draining him and you for years. She's building a nest egg. To leave him? I asked. Maybe, or to run away with him, to retire early on your dime. But this Vinny, the loan shark story Daniel told the police? It's a cover. There is no Vinny, Sarah said firmly. Then why did they need $50,000 last night? I asked. Why the theatrics? Why the fake heart attack? Dating Sarah pointed to a date on the mortgage statement. It was circled in red ink. Because the balloon payment on the fraudulent mortgage is due today, by 5:00 p.m., I looked at the date. The logic clicked into place like a deadbolt. If they didn't pay it, Sarah said, the bank would foreclose. They would send a notice to the cosigner. The forgery would be exposed, I finished. I sat back in my chair. The leather creaked. The betrayal was absolute. It wasn't just greed. It was a systematic, multi-year dismantling of my legacy. They had been mining the foundation of my life while smiling at me, across the Thanksgiving table. What do you want to do? Sarah asked softly. As a prosecutor, I can tell you we have enough here to bury them. Forgery, wire fraud, bank fraud, grand larceny. If we give this to Reynolds, they'll go away for 10 to 15 years. I looked out the floor-to-ceiling window. The city spread out below me, a grid of gray and glass. I want to know the whole truth, I said. I want to know if Daniel is a victim or a partner. I want to know if he held the pen. He forged the check last night, Robert. Under duress? Or because he wanted the money too? Does it matter? To a father, I said, it matters. Suddenly the intercom buzzed. A harsh sound in the quiet room. Mr. Miller? Linda's voice. There is a Mr. Henderson here to see you. From First National Bank. I frowned. I didn't call him. He says it's urgent. He looks sick, sir. I exchanged a glance with Sarah. Send him in, I said. Arthur Henderson was a small man. He had been the branch manager of First National for 20 years. He handled my business accounts, my personal accounts, and my pension fund. He was a nervous man with thick glasses and a penchant for ill-fitting suits. He walked in clutching a briefcase to his chest as if it were a life preserver. He was sweating profusely, despite the air condition. He looked like a man walking to the gallows. Robert, Arthur said. He tried to smile, but his lip trembled. I heard about the arrest on the police scanner. The news is spreading. Sit down, Arthur. He sat. He didn't put the briefcase down. Sarah watched him like a hawk. She didn't introduce herself. She didn't have to. "I have something to tell you," Arthur whispered. "Something I should have told you months ago. I can't sleep anymore." "What is it?" I asked. "Jessica came to me 6 months ago. And?" "She tried to access your corporate line of credit. The 7-figure line. She had a power of attorney document." I froze. The temperature in the room seemed to drop again. "I never signed a power of attorney, Arthur." "I know," Arthur said. He pulled a handkerchief from his pocket and wiped his forehead. "I spotted the forgery immediately. It was good, Robert. Very good. Better than the check last night. But the notary seal, it was from a county you haven't lived in for 40 years. Why didn't you call me?" I stood up. My shadow fell over him. "Why didn't you report her?" "She threatened me," Arthur said. His voice was a pathetic squeak. "Threatened you with what?" Sarah asked. Her voice was sharp, cutting. She knew about a mistake I made in my ledger years ago. A small discrepancy. I fixed it. I put the money back. But she had proof. She said she would ruin me, so you let her steal from me." I roared. "No, no." Arthur waved his hands. "I refused the credit. I told her I couldn't do it, but I didn't report her. I let her walk away. I was scared, Robert. I have a pension. I have a wife." Arthur opened his briefcase with shaking fingers. He pulled out a small, black moleskin notebook. "She left this in my office by mistake that day. She was so angry when I refused her. She stormed out and forgot it on the chair. I kept it. Insurance. In case she came back." I took the notebook. The cover was soft. Worn leather. I opened it. It wasn't a diary, it was a workbook. Page after page was filled with ink. My signature. Robert Miller. Robert A. Miller. Robert A. Miller. The first few pages were shaky, crude approximations. By the middle of the book, they were getting better. More fluid. By the end, they were perfect. Indistinguishable from my own hand. And next to the signatures, there were lists. A social security number. My mother's maiden name. The passwords to my email. The alarm code to my house. "My God," Sarah whispered, looking over my shoulder. "This is premeditated," she practiced. I turned the page. There was a note in the margin. In Jessica's handwriting, sharp, angular script. "The old man is getting slower. He trusts Daniel too much. We can take the whole pension fund next. He won't notice until it's too late. He's just a lonely old builder." I closed the book. My hand was shaking. Not from fear, but from a rage so cold it burned. They weren't just stealing my money, they were banking on my decline. They were betting on my senility. They viewed me not as a father, but as a resource to be stripped. "Get out, Arthur," I said. "Robert, please." "I didn't steal anything. Get out." I slammed the notebook onto the table. The glass rattled. "Before I call the police and have you arrested as an accomplice, you are fired. I will pull every dime from your bank by noon." Arthur ran. He didn't even close his briefcase. He fled the room like a rat escaping a sinking ship. I looked at Sarah. She was pale. "This is predatory," she said. "This is evil." "Yes," I said. I picked up the notebook. I ran my thumb over the leather. "I built a life for them, Sarah. I built a foundation, and they tried to dynamite it," she said. "Yes." I walked to the window. "But they forgot one thing." "What's that?" "I'm the one who knows how the building is wired," I said, "and I'm going to bring the whole thing down on their heads." My cell phone rang at 8:14 p.m. I was in my study, reviewing the blueprints for a suspension bridge in Oregon. I was trying to lose myself in the math, in the comforting certainty of load vectors and tensile strength, but the phone shattered the peace. Unknown number. I let it ring 3 times. I stared at the screen, watching the pixels pulse. I knew who it was, or rather, I knew what it was. It was the next wave. I picked up. Speaking. "Mr. Miller?" The voice was unrecognizable. It was rough, distorted. It sounded like gravel tumbling in a cement mixer. It was a voice trying too hard to be terrifying. "This is Robert Miller. We know you have the money. old man, the voice sneered. Your boy Daniel owes us. If you don't pay by Friday, accidents happen. I sat perfectly still. My hand hovered over the record button on my desk phone, but I didn't press it. I didn't need a recording. I needed data. Is that so? I asked. My voice was calm, conversational, maybe a fire at one of your job sites. The voice continued, ramping up the aggression. Wood frames burn fast, Miller. Especially in this dry weather. Would be a shame if the Skyview project went up in smoke. I closed my eyes. I focused. I am an engineer. I have spent 40 years listening to the world. I know the acoustic signature of a construction site, a hospital, and a city street. Tell Jessica to hire better actors, I said. The line went silent for a split second. The breathing on the other end hitched. What? I don't know no Jessica. I'm telling you. I can hear the train whistle in the background. I cut him off. It's a distinct pitch, a dissonant chord. That's the 8:15 commuter rail breaking into the 4th Street station. I leaned forward in my chair, and I hear the crossing guard bells. That station is 2 blocks from Jessica's mother's house. You aren't a cartel hitman. You're standing on a platform in the suburbs, freezing your ass off, reading a script she texted you. You old son of a... I traced this call, I lied. The lie came easily now. The police are already dispatching a unit to the 4th Street platform. If you run now, you might make it. The line went dead. I put the phone down. My heart was beating fast, but my mind was clear. It was a bluff, but it confirmed the hypothesis. Jessica had outside help. She was calling in favors. She was desperate, and desperate structures are dangerous. They don't settle, they collapse. I woke up to find my world violated. I walked down the driveway to get the mail. The morning air was crisp, smelling of damp earth, but as I turned the corner of the hedge, I stopped. My mailbox, a sturdy brick pillar I had built myself, was smashed, and the driveway, red paint, was splashed across the concrete. It looked like a massacre. It dripped down the slope towards the street, pooling in the crack. Someone had used a spray can to write one word in jagged, dripping letters across the pristine white concrete. Greed. I stood there for a long time. I looked at the word greed. The irony was suffocating. They were the ones trying to steal my life's work, yet they branded me with their own sin. I didn't call the police. Reynolds had enough on his plate. And frankly, I didn't want the neighbors to see a squad car again. I went to the garage. I put on my coveralls. I got a bucket of industrial solvent, a wire brush, and the power washer. I spent the next 3 hours on my hands and knees. I poured the solvent. It smelled chemical and sharp, burning my nose. I scrubbed, scrape, scrape, scrape. The rhythm was meditative. It reminded me that stains can be removed if you work hard enough. It reminded me that concrete is porous, but it is also resilient. I scrubbed until my shoulders burned. I scrubbed until my knuckles were raw inside my gloves. I was scrubbing away the paint, but I was trying to scrub away the shame of raising a son who would let this happen. I was rinsing the last of the pink water into the gutter when a car pulled up to the curb. It was a rusted sedan, the muffler hanging low. A woman stepped out. She was in her late 30s, but she looked older. Her face was tired, etched with the lines of someone who had been disappointed by life too many times. She wore a cheap waitress uniform under a coat. Mr. Miller? I turned off the power washer. The sudden silence was ringing. Yes? My name is Elena, she said. She stayed on the sidewalk, looking at the wet driveway. I used to be friends with Jessica in college. I wiped my hands on a rag. What do you want, Elena? I saw the news, she said. About the arrest. It's on the local blogs. She hesitated, shifting her weight from foot to foot. She did this to me too. I put down the brush. I walked to the end of the driveway. Explain. 10 years ago, Elena said. Her voice was quiet, trembling. We were roommates. We were best friends. Or so I thought. She looked at me, her eyes wet. She stole my identity, Mr. Miller. She forged my name on 3 credit card applications. She maxed them out in a month. $20,000. Clothes, trips, jewelry. Did you report her? I tried. She turned it around. She's a master manipulator. She told the police I was the one who did it and was trying to frame her. She planted the cards in my drawer. I had no money for a lawyer. She ruined my credit score. It took me 7 years to clear my name. I couldn't rent an apartment. I couldn't get a car loan. Elena looked at the house, staring at the windows as if she expected Jessica to be watching. She's a sociopath, Mr. Miller. She doesn't feel like we do. She loves my son, I said, testing the theory. Elena laughed. It was a bitter, jagged sound. She doesn't love your son. She doesn't love anyone. She finds a host. She finds someone soft, someone with resources, and she latches on. She feeds until there's nothing left but a husk. Then she moves on. Daniel is the host, I whispered. Daniel is just the latest meal. Elena said, I came here because I don't want her to win again. She destroys people. Don't let her destroy you. I thanked her. I offered her money for her time, but she refused. Just bury her, Elena said, and then she drove away. I went back inside. I had a clearer picture now. Daniel wasn't just a partner in crime. He was a victim. A willing one, maybe. A weak one, certainly, but a victim nonetheless. He was a man infected by a parasite. Jessica's lawyer called my office at 2:00 p.m. Mr. Holloway. I knew the name. He was a strip mall attorney who specialized in DUI cases and quick settlements. Mr. Miller? He greased, his voice oozing false sympathy. Thank you for taking my call. Make it quick, Holloway. My client, Mrs. Jessica Miller, is devastated by this misunderstanding. She loves her husband very much. Your client, I said, is a forger and a thief. Allegedly, Holloway corrected. Look, Mr. Miller, we want to avoid a messy trial. It's bad for your business reputation. It's bad for the family. Get to the point. My client is willing to cooperate, Holloway said. His voice dropped. She is willing to testify against your son. I laughed. A dry, humorless sound that startled Linda in the outer office. Testify? She claims Daniel forced her to drive the car, Holloway said. She claims he threatened her with violence if she didn't help him. She claims she was a battered wife, acting under duress. If you drop the charges against her, or convince the DA to offer immunity, she will give you Daniel on a silver platter. The audacity was breathtaking. She was ready to eat her own husband to save her skin. Tell your client that I heard the phone call, Mr. Holloway. Excuse me, I heard the background noise, I said. I heard the whisper. I heard her directing the scene. Scream louder, you idiot. Holloway went silent. I have a sworn statement from a former victim of hers, I added, bluffing slightly about the affidavit, but knowing it would land, and I have a forensic accounting trail that shows she has been embezzling from my son for 3 years. Mr. Miller, surely if she tries to pin this on Daniel, I said, my voice turning to steel, I will spend every dime I have, and I have a lot of dimes, Mr. Holloway, to ensure she gets the maximum sentence. I will hire a private prosecutor to assist the DA. I will bury you in motions until you retire. We can make a deal, he said weakly. No deals, I said. Not yet. I hung up. I stared at the phone. The structure was cracking. The rats were turning on each other. The final test came in person. A man walked into my office lobby. He pushed past Linda. He ignored the security guard. He kicked open my door. He was short, stocky, wearing a cheap suit that was too tight in the shoulders. He looked like he was trying very hard to look like a character from a movie he had seen once. Mr. Miller. I didn't stand up. I didn't blink. Who are you? I'm Vinny. I stared at him. I took off my reading glasses. The loan shark. I prefer private lender, he smirked. He walked over to the chair and sat down without an invitation. He put his feet up on my mahogany table. Your boy owes me. I thought you didn't exist, I said. My niece was convinced you were a fabrication. Oh, I exist, Vinny said. He pulled a toothpick from his mouth. But I want my money. Your kid said you were good for it. How much? 10 grand, Vinny said. I paused. 10 grand, Vinny said. I paused. 10 grand? I asked. That's the principal plus the vig. 10 large. Cash. I smiled. It was a cold smile. He told me it was 60, I said. Vinny frowned. His brow furrowed. 60? The kid owes me 10. The final piece of the puzzle snapped into place. Daniel owed $10,000. Real debt, real danger, but they had inflated it to 60,000. They were going to pay Vinny his 10 and steal the other 50 from me. Even in their desperation, they were skimming off the top. Get out, I said. Vinny laughed. Or what? You gonna hit me with a T-square? Grandpa, I can make trouble. Real trouble. Vinny, I said, do you know what this building is? It's a building. It's a fortress, I said. I designed the security protocols myself. I pressed a single button on my desk phone. Security. Lock down the elevators. Send the police officers stationed in the lobby to the penthouse. We have an intruder. Vinny's eyes went wide. He looked at the door. You're bluffing. I don't bluff, I said. I calculate risk. And right now, your risk of arrest is 100%. Vinny stood up. He looked at me, then at the door. The confidence evaporated. He was just a small-time thug, in a room with a man who moved mountains for a living. He ran. He didn't even wait for the elevator. He took the stairs, 12 flights down. I looked at Sarah, who had been sitting quietly in the corner the whole time. It's time, I said. Time for what? Time to end this. I picked up the phone and dialed Captain Reynolds. Frank, I said, I'm ready to bail them out. Are you sure, Robert? Yes, but bring them to my house. Not the station. I want them released into my custody. Why? Because, I said, looking at the city skyline, I need to perform a controlled demolition. And I need to do it where it started. I prepared the living room like a stage set for a tragedy. I moved the furniture. I pulled the heavy leather armchairs closer to the fireplace, creating an intimate, suffocating circle. I adjusted the lighting, dimming the overhead chandelier and leaving only the floor lamps on. The room was bathed in pools of amber light and deep, impenetrable shadows. I lit a fire in the hearth. It wasn't a cold night, but I needed the fire. I needed the sound, the crackle of dry oak, the hiss of sap boiling. I needed the smell of wood smoke to mask the scent of impending ruin. The flames danced behind the iron grate, casting long, flickering shapes against the walls. They looked like ghosts trying to escape the masonry. I placed a black briefcase on the coffee table. It was an old Halliburton case, aluminum and indestructible. I had used it to carry blueprints to job sites in the 90s. Now it carried a different kind of plan. Inside, I had stacked the paper. I had spent the afternoon with a paper cutter. I took bundles of plain printer paper and sliced them to the exact dimensions of U.S. currency, 6 at 14 inches by 2.6 at 1 inches. I made 20 stacks. On top of each stack, I placed a single, crisp $100 bill withdrawals from the ATM earlier that day. I bound them with rubber bands. To the untrained eye, in the dim light of a fire, it looked like $100,000. It looked like freedom. It looked like bait. I called Sarah and Captain Reynolds in from the kidder. Stay behind the double doors, I instructed. There is a gap in the molding. You will be able to hear everything. Robert, Reynolds said, adjusting his belt. This is risky. If this goes sideways, it won't, I said. I know the stress points. I know exactly where it will break. And if Daniel takes the money? Sarah asked. Her voice was small. She was dreading the answer. I looked at the briefcase. Then I lose a son, I said, and I saved myself the trouble of wondering. I sat in my armchair. I placed my hands on my knees. I waited. The grandfather clock in the hall ticked. Tick, tock. The same sound I had heard over the phone. The sound of time running out. At 6:00 p.m., the headlights swept across the front window. I heard the car doors slam. I heard the heavy tread of Reynolds' deputy escorting them to the porch. The front door opened. The draft sucked the flames in the fireplace upward. Daniel and Jessica walked in. They looked terrible. Jail strips the humanity from you very quickly. They were wearing their own clothes, but they looked like costumes now. Daniel's polo shirt was stained with sweat. Jessica's blouse was wrinkled, a button missing. They smelled of that specific, institutional despair, stale coffee, industrial disinfectant, and fear. Daniel's eyes were darting around the room, looking for a trap. Jessica's eyes were fixed on the floor, her jaw set in a hard line. "Dad," Daniel said. His voice was cracked. He stepped forward, his arms raising instinctively for a hug. I held up a hand, palm out. The stop sign. "Sit down." He froze. The rejection hit him physically. He slumped. They sat on the sofa opposite me. They huddled together, knees touching, a united front of misery. Jessica held his hand, but her grip looked white-knuckled, possessive rather than comforting. "I bailed you out," I said, my voice low and measured, "because I want to believe there is still a foundation here worth saving." "There is, Dad," Daniel cried. He leaned forward. "We learned our lesson. I swear to God, being in that cell, it changed me. I'll never touch a check again. We were just desperate, Robert," Jessica added. Her voice was soft, trembling. She looked up at me through her lashes, a practiced look of vulnerability. "We made a mistake, a horrible mistake. But we were drowning." She was a good actress. If I hadn't heard the whisper, I might have believed the tear tracking down her cheek. "I know about the mortgage," I said. The room went dead silent. The fire popped loudly, a gunshot in the quiet. Jessica stiffened. Her hand moved imperceptibly away from Daniel's knee. "I know about the $200,000, I continued. "I know about the offshore accounts in Panama. I know about the shell companies." Daniel looked at her, confusion clouding his face. "Costa Rica, Panama. What is he talking about, Jess?" Jessica ignored him. She was staring at me, her eyes narrowing. The calculation had begun. She realized I hadn't just bailed them out. I had audited them. "But," I said, leaning forward and tapping the aluminum lid of the briefcase, "I am a father, and a father's love is a heavy load to carry." I unlatched the case. Click. Click. I opened the lid. The sight of the cash made them gasp. It was a visceral reaction. The stacks of bills, bound in bands, glowed in the firelight. It represented power. It represented power. It represented an exit strategy. Jessica's posture changed instantly. She sat up straighter. Her pupils dilated. It was a primal reaction, like a shark smelling blood in the water. "This is $100,000, I lied. It pays off the mortgage fraud so the bank doesn't foreclose. It pays off Vinny so he doesn't break your legs. It leaves you with $30,000 to start over." Daniel started to cry. Real tears this time. Tears of relief. "Thank you, Dad. Oh God, thank you. I promise. I'll work it off. I'll pay you back every cent." "There is a condition," I said. I reached into my jacket pocket. I pulled out a stapled document. I tossed it onto the coffee table next to the money. "This is a divorce decree," I said, "and a sworn affidavit stating that Jessica Vance masterminded the fraud, the embezzlement, and the forgery." I looked at Daniel. "You sign this, Daniel. You divorce her. You testify against her. You help the district attorney put her away. And," Daniel whispered, "and I give you the money," I said. "You pay the debts. You avoid prison. You start over. Alone." "Dad," Daniel looked at the papers, then at Jessica. "I can't." "Why?" "I love her. She is a parasite, Daniel." I said, "She has been stealing from you for 3 years. She loves me," Daniel shouted, gripping her hand. "Tell him, Jess. Tell him we're in this together. Tell him we don't want his money if it means splitting up." And I turned my gaze to Jessica. She wasn't looking at Daniel. She wasn't looking at the divorce papers. She was looking at the briefcase. She was counting the stacks with her eyes. She was doing the math. "Or," I said softly. Jessica's head snapped to me. "You sign a confession," I said to her, "stating that Daniel forced you, that you were an accomplice under duress. You leave him. You take $50,000 of this cash right now." I paused. I let the words hang in the smoke-filled air. "And you disappear. You never contact him again." It was the ultimate structural stress test. The prisoner's dilemma played out in my living room. "Dad, you can't ask her that," Daniel said, laughing nervously. "She's my wife. She would." He squeezed Jessica's hand. "Tell him, Jess. Tell him to go to hell." Jessica didn't squeeze back. She slowly pulled her hand away from Daniel's grip. It was a small movement. A subtle shift, but it was the sound of a support beam snapping. 50,000? Jessica asked. Her voice was devoid of the trembling vulnerability she had used moments ago. It was the voice from the phone. Sharp, transactional. Jessica, Daniel looked at her. He blinked as if he couldn't process the input. Is it cash? She asked me, ignoring him completely. Untraceable? Cash, I said. Non-sequential bills. No strings. You walk out that door, you get in a taxi, and you vanish. Okay, Jessica said. What? Daniel whispered. Okay, she said louder. She stood up. She smoothed her wrinkled skirt. She looked at the briefcase. Then at me. I'll sign. Jessica? Daniel screamed. It was a sound of pure heartbreak. It wasn't the panic of the hospital call. It was the sound of a man realizing his entire reality was a hallucination. What are you doing? We're married. I'm not going to jail for you, Daniel, she spat. She turned on him. Her face twisted into a sneer. The mask fell away completely, revealing the cold, reptilian logic underneath. And I'm not going to be poor. You're a loser. You always were. You can't even hold a job without your daddy's help. I carried you for 5 years. You love me, Daniel stammered. I tolerated you, she corrected, because you had a line of credit. But that's dry now, isn't it? She looked at me. Give me the pen. I handed her a pen. She grabbed the affidavit. She didn't even read it. She signed it against her thigh. Scritch. Scratch. She threw the paper at me. Done. Give me the money. I looked at Daniel. He was shattered. He sat on the sofa, his hands hovering in the empty space where hers had been. He looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time. He saw the greed. He saw the contempt. He saw the host rejecting the parasite, only to realize the parasite had already consumed everything. She doesn't love you, Daniel, I said softly. Daniel looked down at his hands. Then he looked up at me. His eyes were dry now. The boy was gone. The hysteria was gone. Something hardened in his face. It was the resemblance to me. The engineer who understands that when a building is condemned, you have to let it fall. No, Daniel said. No. Jessica laughed. She reached for the briefcase. Shut up, Daniel. Go cry to Daddy. No, Daniel said. He stood up. He stood between her and the money. He looked stronger than I had ever seen him. You don't get the money. Jessica's eyes narrowed. She looked like a cornered animal. Move, Daniel. I forged the check, Daniel said. He looked at me. I did it. I held the pen. I knew what I was doing. He took a deep breath. I don't want your money, Dad. I don't want you to pay Vinny. And I don't want her. He turned to Jessica. It's over, Jessica screamed. It was a feral sound. She lunged. She didn't lunge for Daniel. She lunged for the briefcase. It's mine. I signed. It's mine. Actually, I said. You're taking nothing. I nodded to the kitchen door. The double doors swung open. Captain Reynolds and Sarah walked out. Reynolds' hand was already on his handcuffs. Sarah was holding a tape recorder. Jessica Vance, Reynolds said, his voice filling the room. You just confessed to conspiracy, fraud, and extortion in the presence of a police officer and a district attorney. Jessica froze. Her hand was inches from the money. She looked at Reynolds. She looked at Sarah. She looked at the open briefcase. You trapped me, she hissed. She looked at me with pure venom. You old bastard. I tested you, I said. And you failed. She tried to run. It was a pathetic attempt. She scrambled toward the front door, but Reynolds was faster. He had been tackling perps since before she was born. He grabbed her arm. He spun her around. Click! Click! The cuffs bit into her wrists. Daniel, she shrieked. Daniel, help me. He tricked us. Don't let them take me. Daniel stood by the fireplace. He didn't move. He didn't look at her. He looked at the fire. He watched the wood turn to ash. I can't help you, he said. His voice was hollow. I can't even help myself. They dragged her out. She was kicking and screaming obscenities, cursing my name, cursing Daniel, cursing the world. I'll kill you. I'll sue you. That money is mine. The front door slammed shut. The sudden silence was deafening. The fire crackled. Daniel stood in the middle of the living room. The briefcase sat open. The money glowed. "It's fake, isn't it?" Daniel asked. He didn't look at it. "Newspaper cutouts," I said. "Top bill is real. The rest is scrap." Daniel let out a short, choked laugh. It was a sound of admiration and pain. "Of course," he said. "You never keep that much cash. You always said cash was a liability." He collapsed onto the sofa. He put his head in his hands. "I'm going to prison," he said. "Yes," I said. "Sarah says maybe 2 years," I told him. "With the confession. With your cooperation against Jessica. Maybe 18 months in minimum security." "I deserve it." "Yes, you do." I walked over. I sat next to him. I didn't hug him. I didn't tell him it would be okay. I sat shoulder to shoulder with him. Two men looking at the fire. "I'm sorry, Dad," he whispered. "I'm so sorry. I was so weak." "I know," I said. "Why did you do it?" he asked. "Why did you bail me out just to send me back?" "Because," I said, "I needed to know if my son was a criminal or just a fool." Daniel looked at me. "A criminal would have taken the deal," I said. "A criminal would have let her take the money and split it later. A criminal would have kept lying. But a fool," Daniel said. "A fool would have let her take it," I corrected. "But you stopped her. You finally told the truth."
You stood up.
I put my hand on his knee. It was a heavy, warm weight. "You're going to go to prison, Daniel. You're going to pay your debt. You're going to lose the house. You're going to lose the car. And when I get out," he asked, tears streaming down his face again, "I'll be here." "You will?" "I'm a structural engineer," I said. "I know that sometimes you have to tear the whole house down to the foundation before you can build it right." I looked at the fire. "The demolition is done, Daniel. Now we clear the debris." The police didn't use sirens when they took them away. There was no need. The emergency was over. Now it was just procedure. I watched from the bay window as Reynolds guided Daniel into the back of the cruiser. Daniel moved with a heavy, shuffling gait, his head bowed. He didn't look back at the house. He didn't look at the tree where he had fallen out of the tire swing when he was 7. He looked only at his feet, watching his expensive Italian loafers step into the mud of the driveway. Jessica was in a separate car. I saw her silhouette against the window glass, rigid, furious, already plotting her next move. But the glass was reinforced. Her plots would have to wait. The red taillights faded down the street, disappearing into the suburban gloom. I turned back to the room. The fire had died down to embers, a bed of pulsing orange ash. The smell of wood smoke was stale now, mixed with the lingering scent of Jessica's perfume, something floral and cloying that refused to leave. The briefcase sat open on the table. The fake money, the paper cutouts I had sliced with such precision, looked ridiculous in the silence. It was theater props in an empty auditorium. I sat down in my chair. I didn't pour a drink. I didn't cry. I felt a profound, physical exhaustion, the kind that settles into the marrow of your bones after a concrete pour that lasts 24 hours. My hands were shaking, a fine tremor that rattled the armrest. I looked at the walls of my house, the crown molding, the wainscoting. For years I had looked at this house and seen a legacy. I saw it as something to be handed down. Now I saw it for what it was: wood, plaster, brick, and glass. It wasn't a shrine, it was just a structure. And structures can be emptied. I closed my eyes and listened. The refrigerator hummed, the radiator clanked. But the whisper, the poisonous, directing whisper, was gone. The silence was heavy, but it was clean. The next 6 months were a slow, grinding process of dismantling. I hired a real estate agent to sell Daniel's house. I went there only once to supervise the movers. It was a hollow place. It was filled with things: leather sofas, massive televisions, high-end kitchen gadgets that had never been used, but it had no soul. It was a showroom for a life they couldn't afford. I watched the movers box up the life my son had built online. I found the rainy day jar in the kitchen. It was empty. I found a stack of overdue notices hidden in the back of the pantry, behind the imported pasta. I threw them in the trash. The debt was being paid, but not with money. I attended the sentencing hearing. Jessica took a plea deal. She turned on her accomplices, the forger who made the documents, the notary who stamped them. She got 4 years. She looked at me across the courtroom, her eyes cold and hard as flint. She didn't wave. Daniel pleaded guilty. He refused to let his lawyer argue for leniency based on manipulation. He stood before the judge, wearing a prison-issued jumpsuit that hung loosely on his frame. He looked thin. He looked tired. "I did it, Your Honor," he said. "I knew it was wrong, and I did it anyway." The judge gave him 18 months. I didn't visit him immediately. I needed time. The concrete needs time to cure. If you put weight on it too soon, it cracks. So I waited. I went to work. I designed a library for the university. I focused on the cantilevered roof, the way the steel trusses would hold the weight of the snow. I found comfort in the math. Math doesn't lie. Math doesn't borrow money. It can't pay back. Summer had turned to autumn. The leaves on the maples in the front yard were turning the color of rusted iron. The house was quiet. And it wasn't the terrified silence of that night in January. It was a peaceful silence, the silence of a job site after the demolition is done, the debris cleared, the ground leveled. I sat in my armchair. The window was open, letting in the cool evening breeze. I was holding a letter. The envelope was stamped with the seal of the state correctional facility. I had opened it carefully, using my letter opener, preserving the edge. "Dad, the work detail isn't bad. I asked to be put in the wood shop. At first they wanted me in the laundry, but I told them my father taught me how to handle a lathe. It's funny, and I spent my whole life trying to avoid manual labor. I thought it was beneath me. I thought the goal was to sit in an office and move money around. But now it's the only thing that makes me feel normal. Yesterday I built a chair, just a simple pine chair. But I planned the legs myself. I dovetailed the joints. No screws, no glue. Just friction and fit. I look at the walls I'm building, and I understand what you used to talk about. The straight lines, the honesty of it. You can't lie to wood, Dad. If the cut is wrong, the joint fails. It doesn't matter how good your excuse is. I filed the divorce papers. Sarah came to visit and helped me with the notary. It's done. She signed them, without contesting. I think she found someone else to write to already. I don't ask for forgiveness yet. I know I have a long way to go. The debt is still there, but thank you for saying no that night. If you had said yes, if you had sent the money, I would be dead. Maybe not physically, but inside. I would have vanished into her world completely. You saved me by letting me fall. Love, Daniel. I folded the letter. I creased the paper with my thumb, feeling the texture of the cheap stationery. I placed it in my Bible, marking the page of the prodigal son. It wasn't a perfect letter. It was tentative, but it was real. A memory flashed in my mind. Daniel, 10 years old. We were in the garage, building a birdhouse. He had sawed the roof at the wrong angle. He threw the saw down, crying, screaming that it was ruined, that he was stupid. I'd picked up the saw. I handed it back to him. "It's not ruined," I had told him. "It's just shorter. We adjust the design. We measure again. We cut again." He had wiped his eyes. He had picked up the saw. We made a smaller birdhouse, but it was sturdy. It lasted for years. I walked to the window. Outside, the city skyline I had helped build glittered in the twilight. I saw the Miller Building. I saw the bridge spanning the river. They were strong. They were enduring. They had weathered storms and floods. But a building is just steel and glass. A family, that is a structure of a different kind. It is built on softer ground. It requires constant maintenance. I picked up the phone. The receiver felt heavy, but not like a weapon anymore. I dialed the number for the prison visitation center. I knew the number by heart, though I had never called it. The line rang. State Correctional Facility. Visitation scheduling. "Hello," I said. My voice was clear. The gravel was gone. "I'd like to schedule a visit with inmate Miller." Daniel Miller. "Relationship to the inmate?" the clerk asked. I paused. I looked at the empty room. I looked at the fireplace where the fake money had burned that night. I looked at the spot where my son had finally stood up. "Family," I said. "I'm his father. One moment, Mr. Miller. Saturday at 10 over a.m. is open. I'll take it. I hung up. I looked at the clock. Tick, tock. It was just time passing. The demolition was over. The site was cleared. The ground was ready. I went to the kitchen to make dinner. I moved with purpose. The house was silent, but for the first time in years, the silence wasn't empty. It was expectant. It was the silence of the first pour, waiting for the concrete to set, waiting to see if this time the foundation would hold. Life, like any great structure, is defined not by how it stands in fair weather, but by how it survives the storm. If this story of betrayal, justice, and the hard work of rebuilding resonated with you, I invite you to leave a mark of your own, a like to honor the truth, and a subscription to join us for the next chapter. Together, we'll keep testing the foundation.